let's get into what our purpose for tonight is going to be. And our purpose tonight is looking at presenting first and defending the research proposal. And what I want to do is talk about expectations, not your side, but my side. As I listen to research candidates share with me what they want to do and to answer questions, really. I have a few things in mind, and what I want to do through tonight is to share what my expectations would be, what sort of things you need to tell us as your panel, what you need to tell us about where you're going with your research. Now, I always start off and say, look, I don't expect you to have every answer. And it's extremely true. In the research proposal defense, I'm okay if you don't have every answer, because you're there to learn from the experience. When it comes to a couple of years later and you're doing your Viva, I expect you to have every answer. But at this stage, I expect you to have ideas, and I expect you to be open to being able to talk about issues related to where you're going. And I expect you to be flexible enough to take on board feedback. Now, with that kind of initial thing in mind, I've probably done a slide already. I want to sort of just go through my objectives for tonight, and they're really fourfold. To understand the typical process for proposal presentation and defense, so kind of the administrative side of things, to identify the core components that we expect that you can include in your presentation, to understand how to approach the presentation, and more importantly, how to respond to questions and to critique that you're going to get. And you will get critique. That's part of everybody's journey. And to be honest, 10 years later, when you're submitting journal articles and you're doing all sorts of really fantastic research way beyond what you think you can do today, you're still going to get critique. So we just need to get used to it. And the final thing I want to address tonight is to explore post-defense action. So how do we take the feedback, the suggestions, the ideas that we have been given after or through our presentation and our defense, and use that as actionable information so that we can continue to develop our research proposal into a meaningful part of our dissertation? Now, I want to start off with what I consider are the 5 C's, the key takeaways, but I put them down as 5 C's, and this is really what I look for. I'm not going to say this is exclusive to the academic world even. I mean, this works everywhere, to be fair. But what I look for out of a candidate joining and presenting their intended research, their skills on a whole, as well as directly relatable to the research that you are conducting. So I consider this as personal and professional development goals, certainly very important. I look at confidence. We really do need, or you really do need, to be able to demonstrate competence. I look at confidence in a couple of ways. Confidence is not only the ability to, stand up in a presentation or even present on a Zoom to your peers. It is also the ability to answer questions with clear response. Even if you don't know the answer to the question, it is about being able to say, you know what, I hadn't given consideration to that. I certainly want to read up about it. I certainly want to talk to people about it to strengthen my understanding and strengthen my perception on that. So that to me is confidence. We want credibility. Credibility is that you are the right person for your research. So it's not just about what the research is and what it is about and what it might achieve, but it's also that, you know, you as a person are the right fit to address this research and to do this research, and that you will make a good job of it. We look at the third one, communication, that you can communicate with the panel. Now that depends on, and I'll talk in a minute, you know, how it might get structured, okay, because it might not always be a panel, but that you're able to communicate ideas well. We look at clarity. Clarity relates to communication in one thing. I don't confuse my audience, but clarity also focuses on a clear understanding of what you want to do. When we are at proposal stage, it can become overwhelming for us. You know, we can think about, I want to do this research. I go down the rabbit hole of reading and all of that other stuff. And suddenly what initially seemed to be a simple research activity triples, trebles, whatever, and becomes this humongous monster because there's so many possibilities. And what do I focus on? It's almost as bad as going to a restaurant, having a 20-page menu with 2,000 items and saying, you've got $10, go have dinner, and choosing which one you want, because we have to limit ourselves. We have to have our priorities. We have to shrink things down, all sorts of things that we have to do in order to get that. So clarity is about being able to say, you know what? I know where my direction is. I know where I want to be. I know what I want to find out. And I'm not going to be easily manipulated, pushed, swayed into doing other things. Now, having said that last little sentence, it is also about change. It is about being able to respond to the feedback that we get from myself, from others on your panel, etc. But it's being able to respond to that and to adjust in a way that does justice to your research. And I put it like that. I use that, does justice to your research. It's annoying. You know, you write a proposal, you know where you want to go, and you say, you know what, I want to do it this way, I want to do it this way. I'm going to do a qualitative approach. And a panel comes back and says to you, you know what, I think you need to change the way you're doing it. Now, doing justice to the research means you understand you. You understand what you want to do, you understand their feedback, and you find a compromise that encapsulates the spirit of where your research is, which means you don't always follow the advice that you're given. You don't sort of say, okay, I'll change everything, there it is. It's not change for the sake of change. It's change in the sense that you take things on board, you consider them, you let them process, you let them cogitate, and then you come back stronger. Now, a PhD does a number of things. One of the things is it produces a pretty little book. I don't personally give two flying pigs about producing that book as such. The PhD produces development in you. It makes you a better researcher. And part of becoming a better researcher is being able to understand new, innovative, different ways of doing something. and that is change. So if you have that mindset and recognize that what you have in your proposal today might be a bit different in a few days' time, you're actually doing well, because that's important. And to be open to that and to grow from the feedback and the experiences. Now, in a way, I'm going to say presenting your proposal, defending your proposal is kind of like an elevator pitch for research students. And at the end of the session, after we've done the Q&A, if anybody wants to do a 3-minute elevator pitch on their current research proposal, just talk it to me or talk it to us, whoever stays. I'm very open to that and to giving you some feedback on how you went about it. An elevator pitch is a very typical business concept. You know, you get 3 minutes, or there's a slow elevator, sometimes you get 60 seconds to share what you're doing. And I'm going to ask you to do a quick activity as I move into the next slide. Pop in the chat room. You're 2 sentences, no more than 2 sentences. Explain what your research is and how you are going to do it. And if you can just put that in the chat room for us, you know, it'll give us an idea. But it's also about being able to take something that really is complex and overwhelming and huge and say, I can put it in 2 lines. Boom, there it is. So take time. You don't have to do it straight away, but if you want to do that anytime throughout tonight's session, and I'll take a look at them and give some comments as well a little bit later. One thing that I think many of us face is the idea of imposter syndrome. And imposter syndrome is when we sort of have, I'll call it self-doubt. You know, we think about the fact, oh my God, I'm not ready yet, I don't know it. I'm going to be honest. I have imposter syndrome every single day of my working life. It's not that I'm not skilled. I have a couple of skills here and there. They seem to be useful. But at the end of the day, we often are our biggest critic of ourselves. And that's the thing that we have to be able to think about, because being our biggest critic, we talk to ourselves negatively. We put ourselves down. We say things like, oh, I don't know how to do this, or you're not good enough, or you really don't know enough. Now, that last statement's true. You really don't know enough. That's why you've got the next 2 years, because you are going to find that out. But I want to give you some reassurance, because we actually are a lot better than sometimes we think about. When we come to the point of presenting our research proposal and defending that to our peers, whether it be our supervisors or others from our department or whatever, or even in a room like this tonight, we are actually the expert in the room. That's a very powerful concept, and I really strongly believe in this. We're the expert in the room because we've done the reading. We've spent that time doing that really irritating, frustrating, challenging literature review. We've spent our time understanding the theoretical constructs and the frameworks. We've spent our time understanding the methodology and the directions. In fact, we know more about it than our supervisors do. Our supervisors know a lot and they have other interests, but at the end of the day, we know more than them. So by the time you're ready to present and defend your research proposal, you are the expert in the room on your micro topic or your micro niche within your discipline. And it's good for us to say, you know what, I know that. I know more than my supervisor. Therefore, I shouldn't be scared if they ask me something. I should be able to answer it. And if they give me something to think about, I should be flexible enough to say, okay, I can give due consideration to that and apply my existing skill sets, my existing cognitive processes to this to be able to make a decision that is wise or intelligent for my research. A second piece of reassurance that I want to give: your supervisor is never going to put your name forward to do your thesis proposal if they didn't consider you ready. And this is for, a number of reasons. The main one is, I'm not going to put my research student up for public embarrassment to fail, because that makes me look bad. So as a supervisor, I will look like an idiot. So if you're not ready, I'm not going to let it happen. So when your supervisor says, yeah, look, let's do this, that is reassurance. It is a vote in your favor that you are ready and able to handle the situation. And the final one, which I think is kind of relevant, and I think this relates to us all. Most of us get nervous before a presentation or before doing something new, or before, even I still get nervous before teaching a class, which is really silly given the fact that I've done this for 30 years, but it happens. So my comment is, look, if you're not nervous, you're not ready. Being nervous is actually a good thing. So let's move on from imposter syndrome and look at what a proposal defense may be or may look like in the broader scheme of things. Now, to be honest, every university is unique. My proposal defense was to my supervisor and to, as horrible as it was, the whole damn department. We had a doctoral day and everybody from the department came in. Everybody gave their presentation and defended it. Anybody from the academic staff and from the PhD candidates could join in and ask questions. It was more like a forum than it was a grilling. Now, that was great. Other people have 2 or 3 panelists, and that's the only people who are engaged with. So understand that every university is different, and I'm going to try and sort of negotiate that as best as I can with the advice that I give. But simply, it doesn't matter, actually. Just find out what your university does and prepare mentally for that. You're either preparing for 2 people, for 3 people, for a room full of people. At the end of the day, you're still presenting the same content. You're still going to be answering questions, and you've still got to be able to showcase to the room, not only to the people who are evaluating your progress and helping you with it, but you've got to be able to showcase them those 5 C's that I talked about. Regardless, that becomes the commonalities. You have a presentation, you have a discussion, question and answer section, and that's all we're really focusing on, and that's all we're going to spend our time on tonight. A dissertation proposal is a contract, and it's a contract, it's a loose contract. It's a contract in the sense that it indicates where you will be heading as a researcher. It sets milestones, it sets objectives, and it sets expectations for you. And why I call it a contract is it's your contribution The university supervises you, gives you space, gives you resources if you're lucky, but the university does that. There are, as I view it, 3 milestones in our PhD journey. The first one you've already got. You've got entry into the program. You don't get entry into the program if they don't see that you have the skills, that you have the capabilities. The second one is where we are tonight, defending our proposal or sharing and defending our proposal. And the final one is the Viva, which is where we defend our research. So in terms of that, you're already almost half the way along in that journey. Now, as I said, it's a formality, it's a rigorous formality, but at the end of the day, it shouldn't be an intimidating one. A supervisor won't let you stand if you're not ready. And a thesis proposal will rarely pass without an objection requiring some modification. So expect the fact that you are going to get feedback. You are going to be given some suggestions. The suggestions are not go do this. The suggestions are go think about this and come back with a mitigated response. And that's really what's important. Students tend to invert the importance of the proposal and the defense. The proposal is a formality, the defense is a challenge. I think that's wrong. I actually think the defense is the formality. The proposal is the challenge, because to be able to articulate those ideas in a single document is very difficult. The document can't answer questions. You can. So answering questions is actually really easy. The final point I make on this particular slide is consider your defense experience character building. It's actually a really good opportunity to develop your professional communication techniques and skills in the academic environment. Now I'm going to move on to how do we go about preparing. There are a few preliminaries. Most PhD proposals equate loosely to the first 3 chapters of your dissertation, which is great because even though this will evolve, you already have a significant framework from which you can evolve your dissertation and flesh out, write up the research that you are doing. So if you approach not only writing the proposal, but the sharing of that proposal in a defense as, the scaffold, the structure for your first 3 out of 5 chapters for your dissertation, you're actually in the right space or in the right mindset to make that happen. Now, let's move on to a second preliminary. It's kind of teaching grandma to suck eggs because, be familiar with equipment and platforms. I can't emphasize how much this actually has relevance. We all probably know how to use Zoom and Teams and all that thing. Sometimes we're not good at it, but I think it's very, very vital for us to actually make sure we understand the room we're in, the platform we're using if it's online, and how to use any of the equipment there. Because part of credibility, what was one of those 5 C's, part of the credibility is simply standing up and going with the flow, being absolutely bomb-proof or bulletproof or whatever terminology you want to use in your presentation. It doesn't mean being perfect, but it means being able to ride that wave and just go without worrying about silly little technical things like, how do I turn on the microphone, or where's my pointer, which some students do forget. Now, the third preliminary I want to focus on very quickly is draft your own list of questions. So identify gaps, identify possible questions before they do. Now, there's two things here. we have to put a critical lens or a critical eye on our own work. It's hard. We know our work so well and we don't see mistakes, but we have to try and find, we have to try and predict what might someone ask. Now, tomorrow, I'll share on our social media platforms and through our group chats, I'll share a list of common questions that might be asked. My challenge to you is, they're common questions. Try to also think about what they may ask you specifically about what you've got. Now, being able to think about questions in advance gives us another opportunity. Even though we might have submitted the written proposal before, which is usually a given, if we can identify a question and we can strategize and answer for that question, and we include that in our presentation. So for example, in our written proposal, we missed something about methodology, but when it comes to the presentation per se, I actually include that. You can change your write-up anytime you like, but you've identified the shortfall, you've addressed it, you've progressed. That, you earn my respect from doing that, because that again is the growth of us as a researcher. And if we can predict a question and an answer before they do, and we can address that in our presentations, they will see that as well. And for our panel to see that we are growing, not only from 6 months or a year ago when we started this journey, but from the written document that you submitted a week ago to today's presentation, that's actually a phenomenal achievement, and it's fantastic for them to be able to see and perhaps reflect upon with you. We have to think about whether we are in our defense to discuss or to answer. Answer is they ask question, you give answer, we move on. Discuss is to be able to say, okay, what you've just told me or what you've just suggested to me is really interesting. I've got a couple of thoughts about this. Your proposal panel, start again. Your proposal defense panel members, that's a mouthful. Your proposal defense panel members are a resource for you. If they ask you a question, awesome, address the question. If you feel you can benefit from their expertise, make it a discussion, bring them in, engage with them. It's not an examination, it is a discussion. So find ways to pick their brains, find ways to engage their collective experience and expertise in what you are doing and in your discussion time itself, so that as you walk out of the defense, not only have you been asked things, you've answered or given your thoughts, but you've also been able to team think. Not that I wanted to use that word, but you've been able to team think on where you are heading with this. Now, I'm going to argue everybody has read your proposal. I certainly don't go into a presentation defense as a panel member not prepared. Everybody's read your proposal, which means you're not explaining everything to me. I'm not stupid. I want you to show me a couple of things. And this is why I put your task. Your presentation of and your defense of your research proposal is about highlighting the internal cohesiveness of your proposal document, overviewing the context, the literature, and the methodology. I want to see that you have a pathway, or Let's put it differently. I want to hear from you that you have a pathway. I want to hear from you that you have considered options. I want to understand some of the key decisions that you have made as a researcher. And if I'm going to probe you with questions, I'm going to want to understand why you made some of those decisions. So for me, the proposal, presentation, and defense is not about going through every single thing in your proposal document. That will put us all to sleep. But it is about showcasing that pathway and the reason that pathway evolved. Now, that will demonstrate to us a couple of things. It will demonstrate your competence, back to my 5 C's. It will demonstrate your competence as a researcher. It will demonstrate that you've thought about the issues around where you are heading, even if you don't necessarily have all the answers yet. And it will come back to showcasing to me, you are the right person for this particular piece of research. Okay, let's move into slides. Limit your words. Use a large font. Okay, I know that I am very guilty of not using large fonts, but that's because, you know, that's how I am. Make it a simple presentation. So ignoring my font issues, even my own presentations, I try to limit the number of words I have on a slide. I try to keep to keywords or key points. And from that, it's about letting the ideas, letting the discussion shine through. Nobody gives a damn about your PowerPoint skills. We want your research. We want your thinking and where you're going with it. So my final point on this slide is academic communication is how you communicate authentically and credibly. Your slides are a support, but you want all eyes on you. You don't want all eyes on the slides, because if I read too much, I'm not listening to you. I'm not getting the answers to the questions that I may have. I'm not hearing about the decisions that you've made. I'm not understanding your thought processes. I'm reading some words. So think very carefully about that. Now, here's an interesting thing when the panel read. Now, I usually do this particular slide. Oh, excuse me. I usually do this particular slide because I don't conform to traditional practices. What you've got to think about is, look, even if you've only got 3 people on your panel, those 3 people are going to read your proposal document differently. Some might start with the introduction, the literature, and the methodology. They might go in that process, which is fine. That's beginning to end. I'm a little bit different. You know, my interest has always been in methodology, innovations in methodology, and how can we extract data from people, from communities in different ways. So when I read a research proposal, I read the methodology section first. I'm not too bothered about what you're researching, actually. I want to see how you're going to do something. Then I'm going to see whether there's a gap, which is the literature and you pointing towards where you believe currently the research gaps are. And then I'll read the introduction to understand what you're really trying to achieve. Now, because I read backwards, I want to understand the how right at the start. If the how makes sense, the what fits into place. But others might start with the introduction. Oh, what are your objectives? What are you trying to achieve? Is that backed up? And then how you think that's going to play out in your research. Now, you're probably thinking, Craig, why are we even talking about this? Because I want to highlight the fact that a thesis proposal presentation is not an A to Z. Although I'm going to give you the types of slides, the types of content I expect from a presentation, nobody's actually saying you must present it like an introduction literature methodology model. In fact, you can present your presentation in a different way if that's A, how you think, B, helps you to be able to communicate what you want to do. What's important is you cover certain things, but recognize that not only from a reading perspective are we going to get it different ways, but even from listening to your proposal. You know, it's okay if you approach your order of presentation, your style of presentation. It's okay if you approach it differently, as long as you cover the basis. Now, another plug, I'm going to move into a next section, but another plug next week, case study is method. Do register, there's still a few seats available. This is very much focused on how can we as qualitative researchers utilize even a single case study as our approach to our research. So let's talk about what you need in your presentation. And as I said, although I'm presenting it in a typical order, it is okay if you want to make changes. There are strategic headings or expectations that we expect. So title, introduction, background, theoretical or conceptual framework, problem statement, purpose and research objectives, methodology, references, and a thank you. And you know what? Don't laugh, but the most important one out of all of these is thank you. We'll come to that later. I'm going to go through each of these very briefly, just to give you an idea. Again, it's not about the order. What I want to do is give you an idea of what you need to share with us during your presentation. Because when you share, we can then say, you know what, now I have a question, or now I have an idea, I have feedback. I want to give you something that can really work for you. Okay, so the slide, the title slide, it should have title of your thesis or dissertation proposal. You should have a title. Your title today does not have to be your title in 2 years' time when you submit for the Viva. It's a working title. Now, I was always given some really cool advice on this. And even, you know, the last couple of years when I started doing these webinars again and, you know, teaching in this field again, I spent some time with one of my mentors. And he said to me, even as far back as when I was doing my research, and that was before I was born, so quite a while ago, every heading was a question. Why? Because it gave me something to answer. And I really liked his advice, not because it's a rule or anything, but if every title, if every chapter heading you have, for example, the title of your dissertation is a question, the dissertation, the text is the answer to that question. To me, it just seems sensible, that's logical. So in respect of that, it's actually a good idea. There are different pieces of advice out there on how to create a heading. And if you can remind me tomorrow, Farrell, I will actually share a couple of, I don't know, I think they're slides from memory. I've got a couple of bits of information on how you can create a working dissertation title. So I'll share that through our socials tomorrow. Your title slide should have your name. That's because not everybody in the room is going to know exactly who you are. Simple thing like department or school, the university, your program of study. I'm going to say that's really important. It may seem really obvious, right? You know, we often all think, well, we know we're doing a PhD, but different universities around the world, there have been issues with students who thought they were doing a Doctor of Philosophy, PhD, when in turn it actually came out as something slightly different. So by having that there, as I said, it's a contract, right? By having that there, it's also a chance for your university to come back and say, you know what, I thought you had enrolled for DBA, for example. It's a tiny, finicky little piece of accuracy, but it's there for your own, it's there for your own advantage in that respect. And the final one is the date of presentation, because, you know, it's simply just a record. Now, it's also a record for us because we want to come back to it and we want to see how we've evolved. Moving on, the introduction, simply a statement of the study's purpose. What is it that you want to achieve? Now, I'm just going to sort of come back. Before I move on, I'm going to kind of bring the two together. It should just talk about what you're trying to achieve here. What do you want to learn and why? At the end of the day, maybe you want to talk about the purpose and the stakeholders that are impacted. You know, are we doing this because we want to change lives, or are we doing this to find stuff out? I personally don't care. I'm not going to say those people who try to change lives are doing so much better than everybody else. I simply want to know that you know what the impact of your own research is going to be. That's what's valuable. It's not about whether you're doing something groundbreaking that's going to change society. It's simply about that you understand where the impact of your research lies. Now, research impact can be societal, i.e., you change processes for people, for communities, for organizations. It can be commercial. You can actually refine how businesses or other entities operate and earn a living. Or it can be academic. I learned some stuff. Woohoo! All of that's perfectly fine. But it's nice that I know that you know where your impact is going to be. Now, then we move into a background. This gives us the context for the study. So what was the trend, the new development, or the problem that has influenced your study? You had to have a reason that said, I want to look at this. Maybe, for example, you're looking at new, let me think of a generic research topic. New ways to design children's playgrounds in underprivileged communities. Maybe there had been an upward trend in injuries, in crime. Maybe it related to the durability of materials. Maybe it related to rapid overpopulation and intensification of population density within an existing or a new area. But all of that, those are the trends. Those are things that have happened. That's the outside influencing factors. Now, of course, it's going to be very different for each of us, but we should be able to identify what brought us to the point that we are at today for that. And the second thing that I want you to perhaps consider at this moment in time is why you as the researcher? Now, late last year, I did a webinar on positionality, which means understanding ourselves as researchers, what drives us, what influences us, how we perceive the world, and how we bring that into our research. So, you know, maybe we're an insider, maybe we're an outsider in very simplistic terminology, but there's always something personal about us in the research that we're doing. There's a connection. Even if we're doing health-related medical research, there's often a family or personal connection that motivates us to find a solution for a certain problem. So here gives us an opportunity. Oh, sorry, before I move on, if you missed that webinar, it is available on our YouTube channel. And just Google for, just search for The Third Degree. But I think hopefully Farrell will be able to put the channel up for us. That webinar is there. Do go and watch it. You're always welcome to email me questions. Anyhow, let's get back to that as a concept. This is the ideal time in your proposal defense to be able to say, why are you doing this research? It's not, well, I wanted to do some research and I enrolled for my PhD, but it's showing your connection to the background, to the context, to the outcomes of the research you're doing. Now, again, this brings me back to those 5 C's that I talked about right at the start. You know, it is about that competency. It is about all of those 5 C's actually, because you have a motivation for it. And I think it's important to discuss that. Now we should have a slide that looks at the framework or frameworks. So it's a brief review of the theoretical or conceptual framework that ties into your problem statement, the research objectives, and the instrumentation. We are not here teaching grandma to suck lemons. And if you're not familiar with that term, it's simply, I don't want a long slide where you explain the obvious, but you need to demonstrate to me the frameworks that you are using or the frameworks that you think will be useful, because you might change your mind. And to be honest, if you change your mind, I'm even more supportive of you, because that showcases that professional growth as a researcher. But this conceptual framework seems to be relevant today, and I'm going to use this to springboard from. Fantastic. I don't expect very much from this. I expect maybe a quick overview of the framework that you're using, how it relates, and maybe the identification of 1 or 2 key pieces of literature that have guided you to adopting this framework. I think what's important, though, is beyond our proposal defense, keep an open mind about how frameworks will adapt. How frameworks will adapt, how you might realign frameworks, or how you might change, even throw away some of these frameworks, and all is perfectly fine. So keep that in your mind. It's not set in stone and you have to do it. It's your starting point after some decent reading and some decent thinking. But the next couple of years, they might change that. Have a problem statement. So clearly and explicitly state the reasons why you are doing your study or the study. So what is your problem statement? What are you trying to find out? What are you wanting to solve for those, not only for yourself, because, you know, it is about yourself, but what are you wanting to solve for the stakeholders, for other people who are interested in the outcome of your research? Again, this may change. You know, what you have today may evolve differently as you continue to keep up to date with the reading, as you see what other researchers are doing and so forth. My point here is accept the fact that this may change and just go on. It's perfectly fine. We then have a slide on objectives, questions, hypotheses. And what I recommend here is, look, it is about what the research objectives and questions might be, any hypotheses that you may have. Quantitative research is more likely to have detailed hypotheses. Qualitative research is going to be a lot looser than that, okay? The slide itself should just be you highlighting keywords from each. So as you list, say, 2 or 3 research objectives, focus on what the keywords are. What do you feel is absolutely essential out of that? Now we get into the part I like, and this is where I want to start reading. I want to start listening to you, because it's nice to know what you want to research. That's cool. I get all of that. Your contribution as a researcher is also about how you are going to go about this. So in this slide, define the research design that you're going to use. I'm taking the qualitative approach. Why is that appropriate? Because I'm dealing with a marginalized community who do not have a voice, and my approach working with them through focus groups and observations and diary keeping enables me to channel their voice on their behalf and effect change in their community. I feel like I'm doing a defense of my children's playground, but that's really what this is about. It's, what design will you use? Why is that design your preferred approach? It doesn't mean it's the right approach. I'm going to say some people will believe every piece of research can be done quantitatively or qualitatively. Maybe, maybe not. But at the end of the day, if you're doing something that's a little bit of a departure from others, it really helps to set you aside. Now, it might be because you have a rational logic. Maybe all the previous research on your particular topic area have been quantitative in nature. And you want to be qualitative by bringing a narrative, bringing a case study approach, for example, hint again at next week. But maybe you want to bring that approach into what you're doing, which is perfectly acceptable. Explain why. You see the missing points. You see the fact that this can be a value add. You see the relevance of having this. And secondly, you've got a defense in the literature. The literature identified limitations with previous method. Therefore, we had to make a change. So all of these are things that you can include and discuss, talk about, present during your presentation. And these are things where, to be honest, I will ask the most questions, because I want to get a sense of those decisions. What made you prefer X over Y, for example? Now, there are 3 sort of trajectories. Springboard, change, or entirely new. Springboard means we continue off what somebody else has done. So we're furthering existing research, we're furthering existing methodology. We're changing the methodology to maybe incorporate new technology, different populations and samples, or we're doing something entirely new because all the previous research didn't bring us a conclusion and the methodology sucked. At the end of the day, I want to get a sense from you which of those 3 you're trying. I don't again, I don't care. I'm not going to say entirely new is so much better than Springboard. Each has its merits, each has its relevance. I want to understand that you know why. And that's what needs to shine through your presentation. And if I'm going to ask you questions about it, I would hope that that can shine through as well. All right, so you'll have a slide on your methodology for population and sample size. So basically number, how selected, demographics, also ethics committee and review board considerations. Now, you are going to have to submit in almost every case an ethics approval form, which goes through either a review board or an ethics committee at your university. At the end of the day, your research proposal becomes part of the submission to the review board. So in here, you should talk about, look, what are the ethical considerations? Do you have to focus on informed consent? Is there any coercion involved, et cetera, et cetera? Just say, look, you know, my population is this, my sample size is this. Because my approach was this, these are the ethical considerations I have submitted for ethical approval. And that's what this slide becomes. But make sure you have an awareness of all of the foreseeable ethics issues. Again, if you're new to ethics in research, on our YouTube channel, there are some videos I did a couple of years ago. They're not outdated because ethics doesn't change a lot. But, you know, I didn't have the big beard back then, and I kind of looked much younger. But those videos are there if you want to watch them. They're certainly worth understanding what are the challenges or what are the considerations. I'm going to, as a panelist, I'm going to ask questions related to ethics. Why? Because I want to make sure that you understand your responsibilities as an academic, as a researcher. I also want to be able to see, because I always say ethics is a negotiation, it's not black and white. I want to see that you have given some thought into balancing the ethical challenges that you may face with the value of the research outcome that you have. And if you can show that to me in this slide, if you can showcase that, look, you recognize there are individual research ethics challenges in your research, but I believe the trade-off that I have proposed actually is fair. That again shows me your credibility and your growth as a researcher. And that's what's going to get me on side with your research. We want a slide on instrumentation. So whether it's, for example, a survey or the processes you're using for observation or anything like that. Again, you know, say, for example, you're using a survey, perfectly fine. I don't really give a crap if you say I have 84 questions, 72 of them are a Likert 5-point scale, utilize. I don't care. What I want to see is I've chosen to use a survey with this distribution method to maximize my response. This is, you know, relates back to my population. This is how I'm going to engage with my instrumentation. So it's not about teaching us or telling us the specific details. It's about showcasing why the chosen instrumentation works and how you are going to operate it really quickly. A slide like this should only be a minute or so. And in that spirit, I move on. I want a references slide. I don't want the 100 articles that you read in order to develop your proposal. I want you to tell me the references that you cited in the presentation, so that might relate back to the theoretical framework, or any key references, maybe only one or two, key references that have guided you on refining your research journey. Now, the point with this in the presentation is I just want to see what influences you. I don't want to hear about it. I've probably read them myself, or I can go and read them. I just want to see what's there. I don't need you to discuss. I only need you to showcase that this has been influential in both my presentation and my thinking up to here. And the final one, which is what I say, look, this is actually the most important. You might think I'm a little bit weird or crazy. I don't care what word you choose in respect to this. But at the end of the day, you're presenting. You're about to receive feedback. You're about to get ideas. You need to acknowledge the members who are sitting there and helping you today. You need to be able to thank them in advance for the contribution that today's experience will actually give for your overall thesis. So it's important to have that, but it also provides that linkage back to the panel. It's not you, it's everyone in that room. So it's providing that linkage back. So those are the slides. Those are the content that I expect. Let me move into a little bit about executing that, because that's what's important. So designing your presentation. The slide, the graphic on the right is so correct. Less is more. A few bullet points, clear, concise information, don't overload it. I use the rule of 6 by 6, which means I don't have more than 6 lines deep. I don't have more than 6 words per line. This is a really, I'm going to say old-fashioned, but fantastic teaching advice, presentation advice, because again, you want all eyes on you, not all eyes on your slides. So keeping it simple really works. Bold to emphasize key terms. I really should have bolded that myself. I didn't even follow my own advice. But if you want a word to stand out, just underline it, bold it, something that is easy to see. I want that instant visual recognition, but I also want to go straight back to watching you as the presenter, not to reading the slides that you've got. Definitely avoid transitions, animations, sounds. Again, it's not a show or a demonstration of your PowerPoint skill. It is about you being able to articulate and to present to others in an understandable fashion what you've got. If you use transitions, it becomes eyes off you. It becomes a distraction. If you use animations, it's another distraction. If you use sounds, they become a competitor to you. And because I'm now watching the animation, I'm listening to the sound. Who was Craig? I've forgotten him already. I've lost listening. I've lost following that train of thought, that narrative, that story you're telling us. And finally, use a very conservative, professional layout, sans serif fonts. So sans serif fonts are things like Arial. They're not the ones with the little fancy things like Times New Roman. I use that because it's just simply about clarity of reading. We're not doing a primary school project where we try to have 20 different fonts and make it look fun. We just want clean and easy to go. And that's really things that come back to your credibility. You know, I'm not interested in your design skill. I'm interested in the articulation of the research you want to do. And I'm interested in getting that as concisely as I possibly can. And that's part of the overall communication of our research. I'm going to recommend to rehearse. And I'm actually terrible at this myself sometimes, but I still do it. If I'm unsure about something, or I'm doing something new for the first time, I'll rehearse it to try and get it better and become smoother at how I do it. I suggest rehearsing for a few reasons. And I'm going to start with my fourth point rather than my first. Confidence is credibility. If you stand up, or even on Zoom, you deliver and you look like you're confident, you look like you know what you're doing, I automatically believe that you can do this. But if you're like, hello, everybody, is the sound on? Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Can you hear me? I want to talk about, okay, the title of this slide is rehearse. So we're going to talk about rehearsing. You've lost your credibility, because people now will see you're nervous. You can't just go and do it. I come back to that, one of that very early pieces of advice. You are the world leading expert in the room at the time of defending your proposal. You don't have enough justification to be nervous. There are other things that can, but you know your stuff. Imposter syndrome, we need to just throw that out the window and it's fine. So confidence is credibility. Do what or how suits you best. All too often in academia, we have these rules, a thesis is 5 chapters, a presentation must have this. At the end of the day, the cliche phrase, you be you, really is valuable advice. I want to see you, the researcher, you, the individual. I want to see you as much as I want to see your research. Now, yeah, the most important thing is the research, don't get me wrong, but what your individual personality, your unique way of doing things, your choice of words, your way of presenting, whether it be your body language, whether it be how you stand, whether it be the voice that you use, or even the speed that you use, that contributes to credibility. But it also means, look, you're being authentic. As a researcher, you know who you are, you're getting up and doing it. You're not trying to be somebody else. And that's the most important thing. We don't try to be our supervisor. We don't try to be our mentor. We try to be the best us, the best ourselves that we can be. Why rehearsal? It's not a memorization game. You go into your presentation, if you have to have a speech, and look here, I have mine too, just in case. If you have to have cue cards, cool, it's fine. But rehearse so that you get used to the order of them. Nothing worse if you change the order of what you're doing and then suddenly you freak out and then you lose confidence, which means your credibility changes. And the final one is don't read slides verbatim. That means don't just read everything on your slide and leave it there. Don't put up long sentences. I've seen enough, both in business and in academia, in research. I've seen enough people who actually do this, and it doesn't bring credibility. This is again why 6x6 works. Not too many words, which means you can use your own storytelling. You can use your own understanding to be able to communicate things the way that you want. And that's really important. To be honest, if you're going to go into a presentation, I don't even care whether it's proposal or anything in your life, if you're going to go into a presentation and all you're going to do is read the words on your slides, just email them and bugger off, because there's no point in you being there for that presentation. The value add is what you bring through your body language, through your tonality, through your articulation, through your explanations, through the narrative that you use. And that's your personality. And that helps me to understand why you are the person doing this research. Okay, one more plug before I go into the last couple of slides and then into the Q&A. So this is a master's webinar that we've got next week, but also applicable to PhD as well. So it's just about steps in research planning throughout your thesis. So it's not everything up to the proposal, it's everything up until the point that you submit your research. So do join, do feel free to share that with anyone in your network. Now, the last couple of slides are after the presentation, but during the defense. And this is really how do we react to the questions? And more importantly, how do we react to the feedback that we get? That's the important one. So handling comments. So someone's going to say something. You know, some of you guys have put stuff in the chat room. I'll read that shortly. Some of you have asked questions. Some of you might be heckling me. I don't care. How do we handle the comments? I'm just going to, before I get into my comments, okay, our response should always be professional. Whether you agree with the comment or not, the polite thing is, thanks for that. Something I haven't really considered in depth. Let me have a little bit of time on that. Perhaps, and this is what I like, perhaps you could spare me half an hour over coffee and we could talk about it separately. So if somebody's going to give you an idea, milk them for as much as you can possibly get, okay? But let's go towards the more negative comments, because the truth is we will experience negative feedback. I think, academics have to have a thick skin. When we submit for publication, reviewer 2 is always the horrible person who gives nasty feedback, who doesn't like our research, most likely because they're our competitors rather than people who are there to help us. But at the end of the day, we've just got to learn that we can't please everybody. Even me doing this webinar, I can't make all of you happy. I can't give every single person light bulb moments, insightful insights. It's nice if I can, but I know that's not going to happen. And I know there's going to be people out there who don't like me. And I'm cool with that. It's how we handle it that's most important. So my first statement is there will always be an asshole. There will be somebody there who does not like what you want to do. It doesn't mean what you want to do is wrong. It doesn't mean that what you want to do is unwise. It just means it doesn't align with them. It's like if I come to your house for dinner, you can spend an entire day cooking fish. I hate fish. I'm not going to eat the food. I might drink your drink and sit and talk with you, but I'm not going to eat your food. I look like an asshole, to be fair. There's always going to be somebody who doesn't agree. What I look for is you understanding the decisions that you made as a researcher. And even if I disagree with your decision, what's important is you defend that decision. You can say to me, well, I chose it this way. Now that applies to our supervisor too. Quite often we'll get advice from our supervisor and they'll want us to do something very different, something that intuitively we don't feel is right or we don't feel is the way to move forward. At the end of the day, everybody's feedback is just that, it's feedback. As a researcher, as you develop, it's being able to rationalize and decide or utilize that feedback and respond to it. And you can disagree with it. Some people may try to push your limits. You might get a professor who's there who literally just pushes every button. My best advice is, look, expect that they want to tear you apart. Remember, your supervisor put you into the proposal defense because they know you're ready. You're at the standard. Don't worry about it. But people pushing you, asking hard questions, it's all there to see how you respond. It's all there to see how you process and think through. So I'm going to say you are ready. And there's only two pieces of advice I really genuinely want to offer. The first one is answer questions honestly, which includes, I have no idea. I've never thought of that. Be honest with your answer. I chose this way because I like this approach, because I'm not a fan of this approach, because I haven't come across this before. Give me a few days to do some reading. By the way, what would you recommend as a key seminal article that I could read about that to help me understand? Or can we have a conversation about it? And that leads me to the second one, follow up if necessary. Use the panel, the people asking you questions, use them as a resource to help you strengthen your proposal. Revisions. Different for different universities, okay? Some universities, after you present, excuse me for a second. Some universities, after you present, expect you to revise the proposal document and resubmit. If they expect that, do it. If they don't, do it anyway. Whether you submit it to them or not is irrelevant, but you should be taking on board feedback and your decisions, almost to the point of keeping a diary. Make the changes. Make notations for yourself as to why you made those changes, because you might want to come back to that at a later stage as well. But do the revision, if not for your supervisor or your panel, do the revision for yourself so that the document that you have that's guiding you today is the latest version of your plan of attack. That to me is very important. So I'm going to